In the last episode, we went to Jericho, a baptism site of Jesus in Jordan River. In this episode, we are going to Cave of Patriarchs in Hebron, H1 song in Hebron. We are also going to the Sea of Galilee, Golan Heights, Nazareth, and also Haifa. We'll get started after the intro. I'm now driving into H2, the Israeli-controlled part of Hebron. In this single day, I passed 5 separate passport controls. Hebron is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. In the Bible, it's the city where Abraham settled, and just ahead lies one of the most contested sacred sites on earth, the Cave of the Patriarchs. For Jews, this is the burial place of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives, second in holiness only to Jerusalem. For Muslims, it's the Abrahamic Mosque, equally sacred. 2 faiths, 1 building, and no shared agreement on how that space should be lived in. In 1997, Israel and the PLO signed the Hebron Protocol. The city was split in 2. H1, home to most of Hebron's Palestinian population, is administered by the Palestinian Authority. H2, much smaller in size, remains under the Israeli military control. H2 includes the Old City, the Cave of Patriarchs, and several hundred Jewish settlers living among tens of thousands of Palestinians. From the moment on, checkpoints, gates, soldiers, and ID check becomes part of the city's infrastructure. What you're seeing isn't a temporary security response. It's a system that has been in place for over 2 decades. In 1994, an Israeli extremist opened fire inside the Cave of Patriarchs, killing dozens of Muslim worshippers. After the massacre, the site was physically divided, and Hebron itself was fundamentally restructured. We are now heading to the Cave of the Patriarchs, also known as the Tomb of the Patriarchs. According to the book of Genesis, this is the burial place of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. What makes the site unique is not only who is believed to be buried here, but the fact that the structure above it is one of the oldest standing religious buildings in the world. The massive stone enclosure you see today was built nearly 2,000 years ago, during the reign of Herod the Great, the same rulers who expanded the Second Temple in Jerusalem. Since then, this single building has been used as a Jewish shrine, a Byzantium church, an Islamic mosque, and at times, all of these in succession. For centuries, access to the cave below was restricted, with most worshippers never allowed to enter the burial chambers themselves. What you see outside of the building is not a municipal incinerator. This is an incineration facility used to dispose of damaged or unused Jewish religious texts. In Jewish tradition, any text containing the name of God cannot be thrown away as ordinary waste. Such texts must be stored, buried, or destroyed in way permitted by religious law. After passing through security and passport control, I'm entering the Jewish synagogue section of the Cave of the Patriarchs. The cantilever we are now seeing, we are going to see it again when we reach the mosque. Once again, we're going to get through the passport check and security check to get to the mosque. To understand why this building, and even the 2 markers, is shared, you first need to understand what the Abrahamic religions are. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all recognize the same ancestral figures, Abraham. For Jews, he is the ancestor of the people. For Christians, he is the starting point for faith. For Muslims, Abraham is regarded as a prophet, and this place is believed by all 3 religions to be the resting place of Abraham and members of his family. After another security check, I passed through the metal turnstile. I'm still in the same city, Hebron, but here I moved from H2, an area under Israeli military control, into H1, administered by Palestinian Authority. Once past the gate, the atmosphere changed immediately. This is Hebron Old Market, once the busiest commercial heart of the city. Look up, and you'll notice metal nettings stretched about the street. These nets were not part of the original architecture. They were gradually installed amid the decades of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The purpose is to protect shopkeepers and pedestrians below from objects falling from above, including trash, stones, and other debris. Even though we are now in H1, an area governed by the Palestinian authorities, the residential buildings overhead may still fall under Israeli military control in H2. In this kind of vertical diversion, any incident can involve two separate legal and security systems, making accountability and resolution exceptionally complex. This is H1 in Hebron. H1 is administered by the Palestinian Authority and is where the vast majority of Hebron's Palestinian population lives. Hebron has a population of over 200,000 people. More than 90% of them reside in H1. Administratively, policing, education, healthcare, and municipal service in H1 are handled by the Palestinian Authority. However, H1 does not function in isolation. Access to and from the area is shared by surrounding security zones, checkpoints, and road restrictions. Hebron is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Long before modern political divisions, it functions as a commercial center for the southern West Bank. This history still influences the city today. Many businesses operated as small workshops, wholesale markets, or family-run enterprise. H1 contains most of the city residents' neighborhood, as well as its main hospitals, schools, and universities. Daily urban activities is concentrated here: transportation, trades, education, and essential service. At the same time, economic activities in H1 is affected by the broader political environment. Commercial areas located near H2 or near checkpoints have seen a decline in foot traffic. As a result, some economic activity has shifted towards areas with more stable access. For residents, H2 is not an abstract political destination. It is where people work, attend school, receive medical care, and carry out daily routines. This is Hebron Center, a modern shopping mall located in Hebron, within an area administered by the Palestinian Authority. Hebron is one of the most populous cities in the West Bank, and a major center of economic activities. Its large population supports a stable local consumer market. Shopping centers like Hebron Center provide centralized retail space. Business here include clothing stores, cafes, mobile and telecommunication service, food outlets, and everyday service industries. These activities are part of the formal economy, operating under regulation and paying taxes. Hebron's economy has historically been driven by manufacturing and trade. Stone processing, footwear, furniture, food productions, and small-scale industry remain major sources of employment. Many businesses are family-owned and operated across generations. The emergence of shopping malls reflects the concentrations of consumption and service industry. Reliable electricity, climate-controlled space, and centralized management reduce operating costs of our retailers. Primary consumers include local residents, middle-class household, students, and service sector workers. Economic activities in Hebron is constrained not by lack of demands, but by unstable access. Movement of people and vehicles depends on checkpoints and restricted roads, making times and costs unpredictable. The movement of goods and external trades rely on crossings and procedures controlled by Israel. Additional inspections and delays increase operating costs. Commercial and industrial expansion often involve multiple administrative and security jurisdictions. Access to land and permits is difficult, leading business to remain small in scale. Even so, space like Hebron Center charge a single simplified narrative. Palestinian society is not defined by poverty alone. I'm now heading back along the same route, returning to Hebron's H2 area to retrieve my car. That also means passing through security checks once again. In Israel and the West Bank, security screening is frequent, and in places like Hebron, checkpoints are especially numerous. However, for visitors, there's one point worth noting. While procedures are strict, Israeli security personnel are generally professionals and courtesy towards foreign travelers. Passport checks are efficient, questions are brief, and instructions are clear. The focus is on identifications and procedure, and in most cases, clearance is granted quickly. As I drive out of the H2 control area, this is what the interaction looks like.
Hello. UK and Taiwan. Do you need to see our passport? Okay. Our passport. UK. Yeah. The entry sticker here. And it's first. Taiwan. Okay, thank you. You too. Bye.
Before returning to the hotel for the night, I stopped by a shopping mall. The hostage-related posters and slogans you see here trace back to the event of 7th of October 2023, when the current Israel-Palestine conflict escalated. On that date, militants crossed from the Gaza Strip into southern Israel, carried out large-scale attacks that result in civilian and military casualties. Around 251 civilians and soldiers were taken into Gaza as hostage. This event led to a widespread public campaign, including the slogan, "Bring them home," calling for the return of those taken captive. Over the following years, through multiple ceasefire and negotiations, many hostages were released or rescued. By October 2025, Hamas released the last 20 surviving Israeli hostages who returned home to their families. In January 2026, just days before the videos were uploaded, the Israeli authorities recovered and returned the remains of the final hostage taken in 2023. Officials state that, as a result, there are no Israeli hostages remaining in Gaza right now. It is a self-order kiosk at McDonald's. A typical meal here costs around 50 to 60 shekels, which is the similar price to the UK or Western Europe. Wage levels in Israel are relatively high, but Middle East standard, especially in urban area. Minimum wage and service sector salaries are closer to those in Western Europe than those in neighboring regions. At the same time, Israel also has high cost of living, labor costs, reliance on imported goods, and various indirect taxes all contribute to higher consumer prices. The next day, I arrived at Yadani. This is a site where many tour groups bring visitors to take part in the baptism rituals, and is often presented as one of the places associated with the baptism of Jesus. Strictly speaking, Yadani is neither the earliest nor the location most widely considered from an archaeological perspective to be the closest to the original baptism site. This area was systemically developed in the 1980s, with safety and accessibility as a main consideration. This stretch of the Jordan River, located near the Sea of Galilee, lies entirely within Israeli-controlled territories. The roads are well developed, and the site can accommodate a large number of tour buses and visitors. Traditionally, the location most often associated with the baptism of Jesus is further south along the Jordan River, near Jericho, a site we visited in the previous episode. For a long period of time, that area was largely inaccessible due to military restriction and the presence of landmines. In that context, Yadani became a practical and accessible alternative. As the drive continues north, the body of water on my right is the Sea of Galilee. Strictly speaking, the Sea of Galilee is not a sea, but a freshwater lake. It lies within the Jordan River Valley, above 200 meters below sea level. The Jordan River flows into the lake from the north and continues southward towards the Dead Sea. Geographically, This lake is one of the most important water sources in northern Israel. Since ancient times, human settlements around the Sea of Galilee has included fishing, agriculture, and lakeside communities. In the New Testament, the Sea of Galilee appears frequently. Much of the Jesus' public ministry is described as taking place in the area. These accounts include the calling of fishermen as disciples, walking on water, calming the storm, and multiple teachings and miracles. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were all fishermen who originally made their livings on this lake. As a result, the Sea of Galilee holds a central place in Christian tradition. Historically, the region passed through Romans, Byzantium, Islamic, and Ottoman rule. Towns along the shoreline, such as Capernaum and Tiberias, serve at different times as important religious and administrative center. Today, the Sea of Galilee is also a major tourist attraction. Visitors can take boat trips on the lake, explore biblical or archaeological sites, walking along the shoreline, or simply enjoy the scenery. Hotels, hot springs, and various leisure facilities are located around. When people talk about the Sea of Galilee, many may also mention one particular thing, St. Peter's fish. It's not a legendary creature, it's a real fish, a type of tilapia. This species is native to the water of the Sea of Galilee and has been caught and eaten by local fishermen since ancient time. The name Peter's fish comes from the Christian traditions, linking the fish to the Apostle Peter's life as a fisherman. From a scientific perspective, the Sea of Galilee has long functioned as a relatively isolated freshwater system. As a result, the fish caught here today are very likely descend from the same nature population linkage as those caught by the local fishermen during the time of Jesus, 2,000 years ago. This time, my visit is brief, just a drive along the lake shore. Hopefully, I'll have the chance to return, slow down, and sit by the water, and finally taste the Sea of Galilee's Peter's fish, a flavor shaped by more than 2,000 years of history. From the fish of the Sea of Galilee, the story naturally continues here. This is a church of multiplications located in the area of Tabgha, on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. According to the New Testament, Jesus fed a large crowd in this area with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In the story, food that initially seems insufficient was shared among the people, and 12 baskets of leftover remaining. This episode became one of the most widely known miracles in the Gospel accounts. From a historical perspective, this location has long been associated with Christian worship. Archaeological evidence shows that a church already stood here as early as the 4th century. The building seen today is constructed above the remains of a Byzantine period church. The most famous features here is the 5th century floor mosaic. It depicts a basket of bread flanked by 2 fish, and is considered one of the earliest known visual representations of the loaf and the fish story. These archaeological remains indicate that by the Byzantine period, this lakeshore site was already recognized as the traditional location of the feeding of the multitude. A 10-minute uphill drive from the church brings us to another key site. This is the Mount of Beatitudes, located on the northern slope overlooking the Sea of Galilee. According to the New Testament, Jesus addressed the crowds in this area with teachings later known as the Sermons of the Mount. At the heart of the sermons is the section referred to as the Beatitudes. These words redefine personal characters and moral priorities. They form one of the core foundations of Christian ethical teaching. From a geographical perspective, the hillside faces the Sea of Galilee and opens out into a wide nature slope. In an area without amplification, terrain like this would have been well suited for addressing large crowds. The church seen here today was constructed in the 20th century and is not the structure from the time of the Jesus. Nevertheless, this location has long been identified with Christian traditions as the settings of the Sermons on the Mount. The building in front of us is a Church of Beatitudes. In terms of the architectural design, the church is relatively simple. Its octagonal layout is often interpreted as a symbolic reference to the 8 Beatitudes, translating a textual structure into physical space. However, what leaves the strongest impression is not the building itself, but its location. Standing on the hillside, the views open laterally, with the Sea of Galilee spread out below. From this height, the lake and the surrounding landscape can be seen at a glance. After leaving the Sea of Galilee, I continue to drive north towards Tel Dan. This is one of the northernmost and most significant archaeological sites in Israel, holding an important place in both biblical and ancient history. However, when I arrive, the site is already closed. A bit of context helps explain this. Tel Dan's location is geographically unusual. It lies less than 1 kilometer from the border of the Lebanon, and not far to the east are Syria and the Golan Heights. Because of this, access to the site often depends on real-time security assessments. For visitors, whether the park is open is not always easy to predict in advance. Tel Dan is then in the well-known fables from Dan to Beersheba. In the Bible, its expression is used to describe the full extent of the land of Israel, from north to south. The full story behind From Dan to Beersheba, however, is something I'm saving for the next episode, when we reach the southern city of Beersheba. After leaving Tel Dan, the road climbs eastward and upward into Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is a volcano tattoo, rising clearly above the surrounding landscape. To the west, it overlooks northern Israel. To the east, it extends towards Syria. Because of this terrain, the Golan Heights has held significant strategic value throughout history. Control of high grounds means visibility, depth, and defensive advantage. In modern history, the Golan Heights was originally controlled by Syria. During the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel captured most of the Golan Heights. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, Syria attempted to retake the plateau, and heavy fighting took place here. After the war, Israel continued to control the Golan Heights. However, the questions of sovereignty has remained contested within the international community. Before heading towards Mount Hermon, I stopped to refuel the car. This time, I paid 150 shekels for just over 21 liters of petrol. That works out to roughly 7.1 shekels per liter, or about 1.7 pounds per liter. For anyone familiarized with the fuel price in the United Kingdom, that figure may seem noticeably high. In the UK, unleaded petrol typically costs around 1.2 pounds to 1.3 pounds per liter. So why is petrol more expensive in Israel? The answer lies in structure, not in individual petrol station. Israel produces very little crude oil and relies heavily on imported for refined fuel. The market is relatively small, and regional geopolitical risk increase transportation, insurance, and strategic storage costs. In addition, a significant portion of the pump price comes from the fuel tax and VAT. Taken together, these factors keep petrol price in Israel consistently higher than in the UK and parts of Western Europe. After refueling, we continue north towards the highest point of this journey, Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon spans the border of Israel, Lebanon, and Syria, making it one of the most strategically important highlands in the region. Its elevation allows snowfall in winter and makes it home to Israel's only ski resort. During this visit, however, the mountain is not open to public. Access to Mount Hermon depends on season, weather, and real-time security assessments. And outside the winter season, most areas remain closed to visitors. Beyond tourism, Mount Hermon is also highly sensitive from a military and geographical perspective. High elevation provides long lines of sight and strong surveillance capability, which explains why access here has been tightly controlled. The snow that accumulates on Mount Hermon is more than just scenery. As it melts, it becomes one of the key sources of the upper Jordan River, which then flows south into the Sea of Galilee. Water that begins in the mountain goes on to support river, agriculture, and cities downstream. In this context, water here is not only an environmental issue, but a factor that shapes population, agriculture, and long-term security. Although I can't enter the mountain this time, I hope to return one day to ski and to properly explore Mount Hermon. Before heading to Nazareth, I stopped for a coffee. The price comes to 21 shekels. Converted, is roughly £5. In other words, even outside major tourist attractions, everyday prices in Israel are already very close to those in the UK and other Western European cities, sometimes even higher. And if you've enjoyed this journey so far and would like to support my work, feel free to buy me a coffee. You'll find the credit card link and bank details in the description below. We're now arriving at Nazareth. This is a city of great significance in Christian tradition and is widely regarded as the place where Jesus grew up. In the New Testament, Nazareth is not portrayed as a center of political or religious power. Instead, it is described as an ordinary, even unremarkable town. That background shapes its symbolic meaning in religious narrative, a place on the margin rather than at the center. Today, Nazareth is no longer the small village described in the text. It is a densely populated city and is the largest Arab majority city in Israel. Most of its residents are Palestinian citizens of Israel, with Muslim and Christian communities live side by side. In the heart of Nazareth stands the Basilica of Annunciation. This is one of the most important Christian sites in the world. According to the Gospel of Luke, this is the place traditionally associated with the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel is said to have announced to Mary that she would give birth to Jesus. The present basilica was completed in 1969 and is a modern structure built above multi-layers of early churches and dwellings. Archaeological remains believe the buildings date back to the Roman and Byzantium periods, showing continuous Christian renovations of this site over many centuries. Architecturally, the basilica reflects the layers in history. The lower level preserved the remains of early structures, while the upper church raised above the city, making it a dominant landmark in the Nazareth skyline. Inside the Basilica of the Annunciation, the building is organized as a vertical sequence of history. At the lowest level is the space traditionally identified as the home of Mary. Archaeologists have uncovered rock-cut domestic remains here, including foundations, cave-like room, and traces of everybody habitations. This type of structure matches what is known about ordinary house in the 1st century Galilee. From the perspective of Christian traditions, this is a place associated with the Annunciation described in the Gospel of Luke. For that reason, the lowest level forms the core of the entire complex. Above it, the second level preserves the remains of Byzantium and medieval church. These layers show how Christian communities repeatedly built, repaired, and rebuilt on the same site over many centuries. What is visible here is not a single historic moment, but a long continuity of worship. The utmost level is the modern basilica completed in the 20th century, rather than replacing the layer below. The structure is deliberately elevated above them. This allows visitors to see, within the single space, ancient domestic remains, medieval church structure, and modern religious architecture. Inside this church, one area stands out in particular. Along the walls and corridors, a Marian image donated by Catholic communities from around the world. Each image represents how a figure of Mary is understood and duplicated within a different cultural context. Clothing, facial features, artistic style, and materials all reflect local traditions rather than a single standardized form. Taken together, this image forms a visual map of global Catholicism. They show how one religious figure is reinterpreted across different continents. Among them is this one that donated from Taiwan. The inscription is written in traditional Chinese characters, identifying the donor's community. Beneath the plaza of the church, there lies a layer of history older than the church itself. This is not decorative underground space, but the remains of the actual ancient settlement, the village of Nazareth. Archaeological excavations here have uncovered residential remains dating to around the 1st century, including stone-built foundations, underground chambers, storage areas, and features associated with everyday domestic life. These findings suggest that Nazareth at that time was a small rural village. The inhabitants likely lived from agriculture and manual labor in simple dwelling, rather than in urban environment. From an archaeological perspective, this setting closely matches how Nazareth is described in the New Testament. Many visitors notice something quickly when arriving in Nazareth. The city feels quieter than expected. Outside the main church, there are a few shops serving pilgrims, but inside the old market, many stores are empty. One key reason is how tourism works here. Most tourists stop briefly at the church, take photos, shop a little, and then move on. That kind of tourism does not strongly support the inner market. Nazareth is also not in Israel's main tourist routes. For many travelers, it is a short stop, not a place where they stay for long. Combined with limited investment, out-migration of younger residents, and ongoing regional uncertainty, the traditional market has gradually declined. In Nazareth, beyond the decline in commercial activities, another issue is difficult to ignore: visible waste accumulation on the street and the practice of open burning of trash. This is not simply an environmental or aesthetic concern. It is a clear public health risk. Accumulated waste attract rodents and insects, increasing the risk of enteric and vector-borne disease. Smoke from open burning releases fine particulate matters and toxic compounds, with long-term effects on respiratory and cardiovascular health. So why does this situation exist? The cause is not singular. First, local waste management capacity is limited. Waste collection, sorting, and transfer depends heavily on stable fundings, equipment, and manpower. When resources fall short, services are easily disrupted, and waste begins to accumulate in residential area. Second, population density and urban form. Nazareth's old city was developed long before modern sanitation system. Narrow streets make access difficult for large collective vehicles, increasing the challenge of routine cleaning. Third, structural gaps in governance. Cities with predominantly Arab populations, such as Nazareth, have long received lower level of investment in infrastructure and public service compared to Israel's major cities. This is not the result of a single policy, but a reality shaped by decades of accumulated disparity. So what should they do? I'll start with the conclusion. From a public health perspective, open dumping and open burning do not meet modern standard. A compliant system depends on reliability, basic segregation, and prevention of avoidable health risk, not advanced technology. The consequences of open burning is not controversial in public health. Data from WHO and UNEP shows that it releases fine particles, toxic gases, and heavy metals linked to respiratory and cardiovascular disease, especially in children. In public health, the key issue is not volume, but how long waste remains uncollected. Once collection stops for days, disease risk rises quickly. That is why continuity is a baseline requirement. A compliant system requires basic segregation. Organic, municipal, and hazardous waste must not be mixed. This is about preventing avoidable exposure, not environmental idealism. Regulated incineration and open burning are fundamentally different. Incineration is accepted only as a last resort under strict control. Open burning is never acceptable. From Nazareth, the journey continues westward to Haifa. Haifa is Israel's first largest city and its main port on the Mediterranean coast. Unlike many other cities in the region, Haifa is built vertically. The city rises from sea level up to the slope of Mount Carmel, creating a layered urban landscape of ports, residential districts, and hilltop neighborhoods. Historically, Haifa developed as an industrial and logistical center. Its deep water ports, rail connections, and later petrochemical industry, made it one of the most economically significant cities in northern Israel. Arriving in Haifa, one of the city's most recognizable landmarks is the Baha'i Garden. The garden rises along the slope of Mount Carmel, formed by a series of symmetrical terraces that extend from the lower city all the way to the mountain top. From here, the view opens across Haifa, the port, and the Mediterranean Sea. At this elevation, the city, coastline, and harbor come together in a single frame. The Baha'i Garden are an important sacred site of the Baha'i faith. The presence in Haifa is rooted in a history of exile and displacement. In the 19th century, the founder of Baha'i faith, Baha'u'llah, was repeatedly exiled by Persian and Ottoman authority. He was eventually sent to the city of Acre, located just across the bay from Haifa. During the period of exile, he visited Mount Carmel on several occasions and designated it as a site of spiritual significance. As a result, Haifa and Acre gradually became the spiritual center of the Baha'i faith. Driving through this area, it feels remarkably similar to the mid-levels in Hong Kong, a quiet, upscale residential neighborhood. It was later to find out this landscape is the result of long-term urban planning and historical choices. During the British Mandate period, the upper slope of Haifa were designated as a low-density residential zone. This planning approach was carried forward in later decades, shaping to gay neighborhoods dominated by villa and high-end residential developments. Before driving back to the hotel, I make a routine stop at a shopping mall to escape the heat. Compared with other cities in northern Israel, Haifa feels noticeably more prosperous. Retail activities here is clearly stronger, with higher foot traffic and greater proportion of shops open and operating. Overall, the commercial atmosphere feels more active than in many other towns. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. If you don't like it, share it to your friends. And the next episode will be the season finale of this trip in Israel. Stay tuned.